My wedding didn't get canceled. It detonated. One day I was a 25-year-old fashion girl in a big American city counting down the hours to I do with the man I thought was my safe forever. The next day I was sitting on my kitchen floor in my slip and veil, staring at my phone as my fiancé told me he still loved his first love. And I hadn't even met her yet. At least, that's what I believed. If you'd seen my life from the outside a year before the wedding, you'd think it was a Pinterest board with a pulse. I worked in fashion, assistant stylist and junior buyer for a mid-high-end brand that liked to call itself accessible luxury, which basically meant I ran around the city carrying garment bags heavier than my emotional stability and knew every tailor within a 10-mile radius by first name. I loved it, though. I loved fabric, silhouettes, that moment when a woman saw herself in a mirror and straightened her back like, oh, there I am. I had my own tiny but cute apartment, racks of clothes double hung to the ceiling, shoes under the bed, sample boxes stacked like Tetris in the hallway. I had playlists for fittings, playlists for crying, playlists for steaming dresses at 2 a.m. And then there was Dylan. Dylan, 33, tall and polished and annoyingly perfect in a white shirt that somehow never wrinkled. He was a top manager at a big retail conglomerate that owned half the brands in the mall and some outside it. We met at a fashion event where my main job was to make sure a very cranky influencer got the right shade of beige trench. He was there representing one of the brands. I was juggling 3 garment bags and a rack that didn't want to roll when his voice came from behind me. "Do you need help with that?" It was the kind of line I'd heard 100 times from guys who thought a woman holding anything heavier than a lipstick was an opportunity. But when I turned, his expression wasn't smirky, just amused and a little tired, like he'd been in meetings all day and this, finally, was something real. I said no, of course. Then the rack nearly tipped over on me 5 seconds later, and he caught it with one hand like some kind of rom-com stunt double. We talked for 10 minutes about nothing, about shoes and shipping issues and how the catering coffee tasted like burnt plastic. He asked for my card. I assumed it was work. He emailed the next day. It wasn't. With Dylan, everything felt grown up. He booked restaurants that had waiting lists. He remembered my fitting schedule and sent me food delivery when he knew I wouldn't have time for lunch. He let me rant about difficult clients and never once told me I was being dramatic, even when I absolutely was. He was also, very pointedly, private about his past. Not in an obvious, secretive way. More like, when conversations drifted toward old relationships, he'd steer them back to work, or to us. "It wasn't serious," he'd say, shrugging, when I asked about his first serious girlfriend. "It was a long time ago, and I was a different person." I didn't push. I come from a divorced home. I know people have ghosts they tuck away in quiet closets. My parents split when I was 10. It was one of those divorces everyone pretends was civilized. No plates thrown, no police. One day we were 3 at the dinner table. The next day Dad had a suitcase, and Mom had a hollow look in her eyes. They told me they fell out of love. Like love was a misplaced scarf. Mom, Cynthia, kept me. Dad, Rob, moved out, moved on, and eventually had a new family somewhere in the suburbs. A wife who liked essential oils and 2 little kids with his eyes. He was calm, distant, the kind of father who remembered birthdays and sent gift cards but never really asked how I was. We met for coffee sometimes. We never went past small talk. Mom and I stayed in the city. She worked in corporate, somewhere in finance or marketing. She was always well put together, always fine. We were close, but in that careful, shallow way. We talked about my career, her work, my outfits, her book club. We didn't talk about why she really left my father. We didn't talk about the fact that sometimes on Sunday nights, I would hear her crying in her room with the door closed. "Some people just aren't meant to be together forever," she told me once when I was 16 and asked why they split. "We fell out of love. That's all." I built my life on that sentence like it was a solid foundation. When Dylan proposed, he did it exactly the way you'd imagine a 33-year-old top manager in a big city would. Rooftop bar, city skyline, champagne, ring in the glass because clichés are clichés for a reason. I cried. I said yes. He said, "Finally, like he'd been holding his breath for 3 years. We started planning the wedding like we were running a product launch. Spreadsheets, mood boards, budgets. I handled aesthetics, dress, flowers, color palette, muted sage and champagne, obviously. He handled logistics and vendors like another project at work. Meeting my parents, both of them in the same room, was one of the last milestones. It took me 3 years of dating and 1 engagement to make that happen. Mom and Dad hadn't been in the same place since some middle school recital where they sat on different sides of the auditorium, but they both said they wanted to be there for me. I should have noticed the universe screaming at me that day. We booked a quiet restaurant with dim lighting and lots of dark wood, the kind of place where low conversation hummed under jazz music. I wore a cream blouse and gold hoops, hoping my outfit would distract from any tension at the table. Dylan was nervous. I could tell from the way he kept adjusting his cufflinks. I thought it was cute. "They're going to love you," I whispered, squeezing his hand under the table. When my parents arrived, separately of course, I watched them see each other and then see him. Mom froze. It was tiny. A hitch in her step, a moment where the color drained from her face and then flooded back. Her smile appeared a beat too late. Dad's eyes narrowed just slightly, like someone had pulled a file from the back of his mind that he didn't want to open. Dylan stood. Time stretched. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker," he said, voice perfectly polite. "It's so good to finally meet you." "My last name is Hayes now," Mom said automatically. "But yes, nice to meet you, Dylan." Her eyes wouldn't quite land on his face. I thought she was overwhelmed, shocked by the reality that her little girl had grown up, that this man was real and not just anecdotes. If this were a movie, the soundtrack would have gone minor right then. The camera would have zoomed in on the tension, the too long stares, the way Dad's jaw clenched for 1 second when Dylan said his full name. I saw all of it, and I shoved it into a mental drawer labeled wedding anxiety. Ignore. We had dinner. We made small talk about work and neighborhoods and the bakery that was making our cake. Mom kept asking Dylan questions in this weird, breathless way, then cutting herself off like she didn't actually want to know the answers. Dad listened more than he talked, his fork moving food around his plate, his eyes unreadable. Afterward, in the taxi, Dylan was quiet. I leaned my head on his shoulder. "That went okay, right?" I asked. He hesitated. "They're interesting," he said finally. "Your mom seems very young." Thanks?" I laughed. "She'll adore you more if you tell her that." He didn't laugh. Red flag. Number 1 in a series I didn't list until it was too late. The week of the wedding was a haze of satin, emails, and dry shampoo. I was running between fittings and nail appointments, answering work messages in between confirming guest lists and table settings. My phone battery's only stability in life was that it was always dying. Dylan was there, but not there. He stayed late at the office, tying things up before the honeymoon. He forgot small details he'd asked about himself, like which hotel my cousin was staying at or what time my hair appointment was. When he looked at me, sometimes there was something in his eyes I couldn't read. I told myself it was stress. Weddings do this to men. They get freaked out by centerpieces and suddenly forget how to be human. The day before the wedding, everything finally caught up with me. I had my final dress fitting in the morning and spent an hour staring at myself in the mirror of the bridal salon. The dress was simple and perfect. Clean lines, a fitted bodice, a soft skirt that moved when I turned like it was made of light. Working in fashion meant I'd seen every dress trend come and go. I wanted something that felt like me, not like Instagram. Standing there, I tried to picture myself walking toward Dylan. I imagined his face when he saw me. Sometimes I saw joy. Sometimes I saw that strange, haunted look he'd had after dinner with my parents. I swallowed it down. On the way home, he called. "Can I come over?" His voice sounded like someone had scraped it along gravel. "I need to talk to you." You never want to hear those words the day before your wedding. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my heart crawling up into my throat. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up. If I could go back to that afternoon, I would freeze it 30 seconds before he walked through my door and just stay there. In that tiny pocket of time where the worst thing I was worried about was whether my mascara would smudge when I cried happy tears tomorrow. He came in looking like he'd aged 10 years since yesterday. His usually perfect hair was a little messy, his tie loosened, his eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept. He didn't kiss me hello. "We need to sit," he said. I didn't want to sit. I wanted to rewind. We sat at my tiny kitchen table, between the stack of wedding favors and the vase of peonies my maid of honor had dropped off. I watched his hands. They were shaking. "Amy," he started, then stopped, shutting his eyes briefly like he was bracing for impact. "I can't marry you tomorrow." The room tilted. I know people say that like a metaphor, but it really felt like the floor went sideways. I stared at the magnets on my fridge, at the grocery list we'd made together, at the stupid cartoon avocado magnet that said, "Let's Avo some fun." "What?" I whispered. "I can't," he repeated. "I can't go through with it." My first instinct was practical. "Are you sick? Did something happen? We can postpone, we can—" "It's not that," he cut in. I still love someone else." Words fell between us, ugly and solid. "My first love," he added, like that somehow made it noble. I just kept blinking at him because my brain refused to process the sentence. "We were together a long time ago," he said. "I thought I was over it. I thought I could move on. Being with you, I wanted to. I care about you, Amy. I really, really care about you. But last night, I realized I'm still in love with her. Last night, dinner, my parents, Mom's face. You know that feeling when a puzzle piece clicks into place and suddenly the picture is something awful? I felt that, but hazy, unfinished, like my brain was afraid to complete the image. "Who is she?" I asked. "Do I know her?" His eyes flickered, just for a second. Panic, guilt, something dark. "It doesn't matter," he said too quickly. "You don't know her. It's from my past." Liar, I thought, and hated myself for thinking it. I should have screamed, thrown something, demanded names, explanations. Instead, I sat there in my cute pre-wedding outfit with my nails freshly done and said, "Okay." I said okay because my body went into survival mode. Because if I pretended it was negotiable, maybe I could control it. "We can work through this," I said. "We can postpone and you can figure out what you feel and—" He shook his head. "It wouldn't be fair to you." That's the thing about cowards. They always dress their selfishness up as protection. "I can't stand at that altar and promise you forever while I'm thinking about someone else," he said. "You deserve better than that." You deserve better. Another phrase people use when they're tearing your life in half. I don't remember everything I said after that. Snatches of words float back to me sometimes. "How long have you known?" And, "Was any of this real?" And, "Why did you propose then?" He answered, but my brain recorded it like distant radio static. Something about denial, about wanting to build a future with me and hoping old feelings would fade. Something about last night making him realize he was still in love with his past. With her. I didn't cry while he was there. My face went numb. My heart felt like a glass ornament you drop and somehow it doesn't shatter when it hits the ground. It just sits there, stunned. He left with a packed overnight bag he'd brought in without me noticing, which meant he'd planned not to stay. When the door closed behind him, the first tear felt hot enough to burn a line down my cheek. In the span of one conversation, I lost a fiancé and gained a ghost. The practical part of me kicked in that evening because weddings involve logistics, even when they're wrecked. I called my maid of honor, I called the venue, I called vendors, I called guests. I typed and deleted text messages so many times my thumbs hurt. I told people there'd been a change of plans and personal reasons and we're not going through with it. Some people asked questions, some didn't. Some sent voice notes filled with outrage on my behalf. I listened to none of them that night. Mom called me 15 times. I didn't pick up. Dad called once and left a voicemail. "I'm sorry, kiddo. Call me when you can." The next morning, instead of waking up to my wedding day, I woke up at 4 a.m., to the sound of my own sobbing. It was raining. The city outside my window looked as wrecked as I felt. I put on my wedding veil at 6 in the morning just to see how it looked. It looked like someone else's. By day 3, I hadn't showered. The peonies in the vase had started to wilt, petals dropping one by one onto the table like a countdown. I watched the condensation drip down a bottle of untouched champagne. That's when Dad knocked. Rob has never been the dramatic entrance type. He's quiet, understated, the kind of man you forget is in the room until he suddenly says something that makes everyone go silent. Seeing him on my doorstep that day, holding a paper bag like he'd brought groceries, was the most emotion I'd seen on his face in years. Not because he looked sad, he always had a resting sadness, but because he looked determined. "Amy," he said softly, "can I come in?" I stepped aside. He put the paper bag on the counter. Soup, crackers, tea, my father's version of a rescue kit. "I'm sorry," he said, eyes taking in the chaos of the apartment, the dress bag hanging on a hook, the scattered bobby pins, the crumpled tissues. "I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault," I muttered. He sat at the table and gestured for me to sit too. "There's something I should have told you a long time ago," he began, and my stomach dropped because that sentence never leads anywhere good. I wrapped my arms around myself. "I thought it was in the past," he continued. "I thought, if it stayed buried, it couldn't hurt you. I was wrong. There are moments when your life cleaves into before and after." I didn't know yet that his next words would draw that line. "Do you remember when your mother left?" he asked. "Of course," I said bitterly. "You guys fell out of love." He flinched, like the words had physical weight. "That's what we told you," he said, "but that's not what happened." The air in the room thickened. "Your mother was 28, he said slowly. "She worked in marketing at a big company. They took on a summer intern. He was 18, young, stupid, full of big ideas. It started as mentorship, I guess. Long nights at the office, projects, coffee runs. I thought she was just dedicated to her job." He swallowed. "One day, she told me she was in love with him." Every word landed like a stone. "I thought it was a crisis," he said. "A phase. She said he made her feel young, seen, alive. All those cliches people throw around when they're about to blow up their lives. I begged her to reconsider, to think about you, about us." I pictured my mother, 28, in some office lobby with a skinny boy carrying her laptop bag, laughing like she was in a perfume commercial. "She didn't," he said. "She left. She moved in with him. It was public. People at her work talked, our families talked. I was humiliated, but mostly I was just broken. For you. You were 10. You adored her." My chest ached. I remembered Mom disappearing into her room more and more in that last year. I remembered shadows passing under doors, whispered phone calls, our neighbors' sympathetic eyes. "How long were they together?" I asked, my voice barely more than air. "Less than a year," he said. "He didn't want the responsibility." Surprise. His mouth twisted. "She called me crying one night, said he'd ended it, said she'd made a mistake, that she wanted to come home. And I couldn't. I told her no. I told her I couldn't live with someone who'd blown up our family for a teenage fantasy." There was no triumph in his voice, just exhaustion. "She never came back," he said. "They never really worked it out. You stayed with her, and I thought, maybe that was better. Maybe you'd be happier in the city with her, and I'd just be the boring dad in the suburbs." I stared at the table, at a dried pink petal stuck to the wood. "You never told me," I whispered. "How could I?" he said. "How do you tell a little girl that her mother blew up her life for some kid? I told myself I was protecting you. That what mattered was that she loved you, not what she did to me." He ran a hand over his face, the lines at the corners of his eyes deepening. "I didn't expect," he said slowly, that he would ever show up again. I looked up. The room shrank. What? I breathed. He met my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something other than distance there. I saw anger. I saw regret. When you brought Dylan to dinner, he said, I recognized him. My brain refused. No, it said. No, no, no. He's older now, of course, Dad continued. But the name, the face, the way your mother went white when she saw him. He gave a bitter little laugh. It didn't take a genius. The world narrowed to his next sentence. His name was Dylan, he said quietly. And his first love is your mother. The sound I made didn't feel like it belonged to a human being. It tore out of my throat before I could stop it. Dad kept talking, words tumbling out now like he'd held them back for months. I thought maybe he'd changed, he said. Maybe he really loved you. Maybe your mother's mess was behind him. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere in your relationship, that you were an adult, that dragging the past into it would only make things worse. How long has he known? I cut in, my mind spinning back through every look, every pause, every tense silence. Dad hesitated. He knew that night, he admitted. Your mother slipped. She said something, called me later in a panic. She told me she'd recognized him, that he'd recognized her. They talked, apparently, after dinner. She said he promised not to tell you, that it was ancient history. The room went blurry. 6 months. For 6 months, the man I was going to marry had known he once broke my mother's heart, that she'd broken our family for him, and he never told me. I staggered to my feet, knocking my chair back. Sit down, Amy, Dad said urgently. You're pale. Get out, I whispered. He froze. Amy, get out. Tears blurred everything, turned my father into a smeared figure. I wasn't thinking logically. I was thinking about being 10 years old and watching my father pack a suitcase, about being 25 and watching my fiancé walk out with an overnight bag. 2 men, same door, same hollow feeling. I thought I was protecting you, Dad said again, voice cracking. Get out, I screamed. He flinched, but did as I asked. The door closed softly behind him. I collapsed on the floor. My mother's betrayal had been hidden from me for 15 years. My fiancé's betrayal had been hidden from me for 6 months. My father's silence had stretched over both. I lay there for a long time, cheek pressed against cold hardwood, the veil of my former life finally ripping all the way down the middle. The next few days blurred into one long, ugly montage. I called Mom and left a single voicemail. How could you? She called back a dozen times. I let it go to voicemail. I didn't want to hear her say his name. I didn't want to listen to explanations about being young and stupid and not knowing he was your Dylan. He was never my Dylan, I wanted to scream. He was yours, twice. I thought about every moment we'd shared, every story she'd edited to protect herself, every time she'd nodded approvingly when I mentioned Dylan, saying, he sounds like a good man. Did she want to warn me? Did she want to relive her youth through me? Or did she just not know how to be anything but selfish? I didn't speak to Dylan again. He texted once, a long paragraph about being sorry and hating himself and never intending to hurt me. He said he'd learned the truth about my mother only recently and hadn't known how to tell me without destroying me. The irony of that nearly made me laugh. I already know, I typed back. You both did that job perfectly. Then I blocked his number. The world outside kept spinning. Work emailed about my time off and transition back, like I'd just taken a long weekend instead of having my life cracked open. Friends checked in. I said as little as possible. The one thought that kept looping in my head like bad background music was this: if love can look like this, why would I ever want it? Mornings became the worst. I'd wake up with this heavy moment of blankness, then remember. My brain would replay the restaurant dinner, Dylan's face, my mother's flinch, my father's words. Every corner of the city held some version of us. The coffee shop where we'd picked our cake, the street where Dylan had once grabbed my hand and pulled me under an awning to kiss me in the rain, the subway station where Mom had hugged me and said, "I'm so happy for you, baby." with eyes that had already recognized the man in my photos. I couldn't breathe in that city anymore. The idea of leaving came slowly, then all at once. A client at work sent me mood boards for a resort campaign. Bright blue water, empty beaches, women in gowns walking on sand. I stared at the photos, and this thought bloomed. What if I just left? Not for a weekend, not for a rebound vacation. Really left. A small coastal town started to seem like the only place in the world that hadn't heard my story. I gave notice at work. They tried to keep me, offered me leave, remote days, anything but a clean break. I smiled, thanked them, and signed the paperwork anyway. I broke the lease on my apartment with the money I got back from the non-refundable deposits we'd paid for the wedding. There was a bitter poetry in that, canceling a future to pay for escape. I sold my wedding dress to a stranger online. She came to pick it up with her mom. They cried when they saw it. I didn't. I folded it into the garment bag like I was packing away a costume from a play I'd never performed. I didn't tell my parents I was leaving. They had used silence like a weapon. I decided to use it like a shield. I chose the town randomly, scrolling through maps until a name felt right. It was a small coastal place a few hours' drive away, with one main street, a boardwalk, and a population that probably all knew each other's laundry schedules. I packed 2 suitcases, clothes, a few pairs of shoes, my sketchbook, my laptop. I left most of my life in cardboard boxes in Mom's storage unit. She texted when she found them. "Where are you?" "Amy, please. We need to talk." I didn't reply. The day I left, the city was stubbornly beautiful. The sky was clear, the air just cool enough for a light jacket. I put on sunglasses so I wouldn't see my reflection in every window. As the bus pulled out of the station, skyscrapers shrinking behind us, my phone buzzed one last time. Dad. I didn't open it. I turned the phone off and watched the landscape change from glass and steel to trees and then, finally, a strip of blue on the horizon. The ocean. The coastal town smelled like salt and fried food. Gulls screamed overhead. The houses were small and colorful, like someone had dropped a box of crayons along the shoreline. I rented a tiny apartment above a bookstore whose bell jingled every time someone walked in. You could hear the waves from the bedroom if you left the window cracked at night. The landlady, a woman in her 60s with short gray hair and a no-nonsense attitude, handed me the keys and said, "Rule number 1, sand stays at the door. Rule number 2, if the pipes make noises, they're just old, not haunted." I almost smiled. It took me a while to figure out what to do there. I wasn't ready to jump back into fashion properly. Every time I opened my laptop to look at job listings in the city, my chest tightened. There was a little boutique on the main street that sold a mix of vintage and local designers. One day, I walked in to kill time and walked out with a job. The owner, a woman named Lila with multicolored scarves and a laugh like wind chimes, took one look at my resume and said, "You're overqualified, but I'm underpaid, so this works out." Working there felt like rehab for my relationship with clothes. Instead of fittings for influencers and campaigns, I helped real women, locals, tourists, teenagers, retired teachers, try on dresses for first dates, anniversaries, casual Tuesday afternoons when they just wanted to feel pretty. I could breathe in that shop. The stakes were lower. There was no corporate pressure, no executives, no Dylan lurking behind the scenes of a brand strategy. I developed routines, morning coffee at the same cafe where the barista eventually started making my order before I asked. Walks along the beach before opening the shop, sand cool under my feet, waves licking at my ankles. Evenings at home reading or sketching designs I had no idea if I'd ever make. Healing is boring, by the way. No one tells you that. It's not all epiphanies and sunrise yoga. It's eating toast for dinner too many nights and crying over a commercial, and then one day realizing you went a whole hour without thinking about him. I didn't date. I avoided eye contact with men who smiled at me too long. I wasn't interested in being anyone's story this time. Every few weeks I'd wake up from a dream where I was back in my wedding dress, standing at the end of an aisle that led not to Dylan, but to an empty space. Sometimes my mother was there instead, waiting with that look on her face I couldn't decode. I'd go down to the shore, wrap my arms around myself, and let the wind strip away the last shards of sleep. I thought I'd left my past behind. But some ghosts know how to follow. It happened on a Tuesday because of course it did. Tuesdays are harmless until they're not. Business at the boutique was slow. Lila had gone to a buying trip in the city, leaving me in charge. The bell above the door jingled. I looked up, expecting a tourist. It was my mother. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating. She looked almost the same as she had in the city, sleek blowout, tailored coat, heels that didn't belong on a boardwalk. But there were new lines around her mouth, a tiredness in her eyes. "Amy," she breathed, like my name was a prayer. The air in the shop felt too thin. The sound of the waves outside dimmed, replaced by a rushing in my ears. "How did you find me?" I asked. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. She held up her phone. "Your Instagram," she admitted. "You posted a photo of the beach. The bookstore's sign was in the background. It wasn't hard." Of course. I'd made a new account when I moved, thought I'd kept it anonymous. I'd forgotten how well she could read me when she wanted to. She took a step closer. I took one back. "You look good," she said weakly. "Healthy." "Running away suits me, I guess," I said. Her face crumpled. "I deserve that." "Do you?" I asked, heat rising in my chest. "Because I haven't even gotten through the list of what you deserve yet." She flinched. "I know I have no right to ask," she said, voice shaking. "But can we talk? Please. I drove a long way." I thought of 10-year-old me waiting by the window for her car to come back. 15-year-old me asking why she and Dad split and getting that one lazy sentence. We fell out of love. 25-year-old me putting on a wedding veil, having no idea I was about to be sacrificed on the altar of my parents' unfinished business. "You had 15 years to talk," I said. "You had 10 when I asked you what happened and you gave me a fairy tale. You had 6 months from the night you recognized him at dinner." My voice broke on that last word. "You chose silence every time." Tears spilled over onto her cheeks. "I was ashamed," she whispered. "I didn't know how to tell you that I'd been that stupid, that selfish, that I'd hurt your father so badly. And when I saw him with you, I thought if I said nothing, maybe he'd be different with you. Maybe he'd finally do the right thing." "He did what he's always done," I said flatly. "He chose himself." She nodded, sobbing now. I know. And I'm so sorry, Amy, for all of it, for him, for me, for..." I held up a hand. "Stop." She actually did. That might have been a first. "I didn't move here to give you closure," I said quietly. "I moved here because I needed a place where your choices didn't echo off every building." Her lip trembled. "I just want you to know that I love you," she said. "That leaving your father was never about you. That what happened with Dylan, it was a mistake I made as a stupid girl and then again as a cowardly woman." "And I was what?" I asked. "Collateral damage, a lesson? A chance for you to see what would have happened if you'd married him instead?" Her shoulders sagged like I'd hit something vital. "No," she whispered. You were always my baby. I just didn't know how to be the kind of mother you needed." Silence settled between us, thick as fog. Outside, a kid laughed somewhere on the street. The bell on the bookstore door chimed faintly. "I can't fix the past," she said. "But I want to be in your future, if you'll let me. I'll come to therapy. I'll answer any question. I'll tell you every ugly detail you want to know. "No," I said. She blinked. "What?" "No," I repeated. "You don't get to decide that showing up and crying earns you a place in my future. You spent 15 years choosing your comfort over my truth. I am allowed to choose my peace over your guilt." She reached for me, hand outstretched. "Amy, please." I stepped back. "You already chose once," I said. "You walked out on Dad for an 18-year-old intern and called it love. 15 years later, you held my hand while I walked toward the same man and called it support." She sobbed, shaking her head. "I swear, I never wanted..." "You wanted to avoid being the villain in your own story," I cut in. "That's all." The words came out sharp, clean. They tasted like seawater and steel. "I am so, so sorry," she whispered again. "I know," I said. "And maybe one day, when I'm not still picking glass out of my heart, I'll care more about your apologies." I moved to the door and opened it, the little bell jangling cheerfully, cruelly. "You should go," I said. She looked at me like she was trying to memorize my face. "If you change your mind, I'll know where to find you," I said. "I've always known. That was never the problem." She stepped outside, the wind grabbing at her coat. For a moment, she stood there, silhouetted against the harsh brightness of the street. Then she turned and walked away. I watched her go until she turned the corner and disappeared, swallowed by a town she didn't belong to. Then I closed the door and leaned against it, shaking, my chest hollow and burning at the same time. That night, I went down to the beach after closing the shop. The sky was bruised purple, the last smear of sunset fading at the horizon. The waves rolled in, steady and indifferent. I walked until my shoes were full of sand, then kicked them off and let the cold water bite at my toes. The wind yanked at my hair, salty and wild. I thought about my parents, both of them. My father, who'd chosen silence and a neat little life somewhere else. My mother, who'd chosen chaos and then tried to tidy it up with half-truths and tears. Dylan, somewhere in the city, probably telling himself he was the tragic hero of this story because he'd followed his heart. I thought about love, the way they'd all modeled it for me, as something you fall in and out of, something you use to justify selfishness, something you hide behind when you're afraid to tell the truth. And I thought about myself, about the girl who used to believe that if she worked hard, was kind, stayed positive, she'd be rewarded with stability. A career, a husband who kept his promises, parents who'd outgrown their mistakes. I wasn't that girl anymore. The ocean roared, endless and unbothered by human drama. People romanticize the sea like it's gentle. It isn't. It erodes cliffs, swallows ships, drags things under. But it's honest about it. It never pretends to be anything but what it is. For the first time in months, that felt like something I could trust. I stood there until my feet went numb, until the stars came out one by one like someone poking holes in the dark. I didn't make a vow to never love again. That would have been too dramatic, even for me. I just made a quieter promise, one that sat in my chest like a new backbone. If anyone ever wants a place in my life again, they're going to have to show up without secrets, without half-truths, without hiding behind what they claim to feel. Because I've seen what love looks like in the hands of cowards, and I'm not healed, not ready, not fine, but I'm done letting cowards write my story.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and explore our channel for more love, betrayal, and redemption tales.